In this lesson 20, JUnit Testing. Here we're going to be looking at the different testing that you should do for all your new modules. All your Java classes that you create should all have JUnit tests. If we look at our Eclipse, you will see that we have a separate directory called test, where we show all the test classes. As I was saying, there should be every entity that you create, any plugin that you create, any service that you create should all be tested. And in fact, this is the policy that Oracle uses for automated testing for a build server, which will test all the code continuously as new changes come in. And that is a policy that should be done also for all customized development as well. Here we're not going to be showing all the different types of tests that you should have, but we should be testing all scenarios for testing on change handlers, whether the validation passes or errors, and there should be proper tests created for each and capturing the errors and making sure that they actually correspond to expectations. Suffice it to say that if I just open up a couple of these, each one of these tests, this is an implementation test for our check user, existing user. That uses, it extends a superclass algorithm implementation test case. For a service, like a business service, we have a service test case, and for example, for a batch, we have a batch job test case. You have to find the appropriate type of test for each particular type of custom code that you've created. Here I'm not going to go and show you all that. I would like to actually take one example of a unit test that we have in the system, and which I have coded, and that is the check existing user, and go through and explain on high level what we do. The JUnit will test anything which starts with a method test, check, and test, and it starts with, this example is check user ID. And what I do first of all is create a user setup. I create my data. The data can be queried from the system itself and from the database, from the application, or you could, within your own unit tests, create data which is not persisted. In this particular case, I'm creating a user setup process type and transaction, which are not within the system. I'm going to create them within the test JUnit, and anything which is, as I said, created within the JUnit is not persisted and will be recreated each time. And therefore you don't have to rely upon data within the system. So here this user setup and user setup type are being created by myself. Again, not everything that I'm doing is created on the fly here. I'm relying upon an underlying BO. And you will see that as I'm creating the test, I'm also relying upon an existing algorithm in the system. I'm using the algorithm called CMUS user X, which is the one I have over here. And really, if you want to do unit testing completely correctly and not rely upon any metadata, any data in the system, you should recreate all your data yourself. That sometimes makes the unit test extremely long and a little difficult to sort of set up each time. However, it has great results if you can do that. However, in my particular case of testing, I was using my unit test mainly to test particular custom code, so that I don't have to continuously deploy to the server. So I sometimes cut corners and didn't continuously create the data myself within my unit tests. So going back to what we have here, I create a user setup type and a transaction, and then I'm reading the business object. What I'm doing here is setting up the inputs needed for my BO status enter algorithm. So I am creating the dispatcher, I'm calling the dispatcher, reading in and creating the BO instance and the key that is necessary. And then I'm setting my any data that I'm which is important for other information. For example, here I'm testing to see that I have an existing user, so I'm setting the login ID to be my name, meaning that there is already a user in the system that we have found. So therefore, I'm testing to see that this user can be found on the check user algorithm. Once I have that, I am setting up my algorithm by calling the algorithm. Again, as I said, often you should actually create the algorithm in the test case yourself, but here I'm relying upon an existing one in the system. Calling the algorithm spot and setting the inputs, the business object and the key that I created above. Now, once you've done that, you actually can run this unit test directly from here, and you can run it you can either run it directly to see if it works completely, or you can, different configurations exist within Eclipse, and if you use the debug, then it will run through this test and in debug mode. So I'm going to actually create just to create a breakpoint over here, and I'm going to run this in debug mode. And I've also actually, this is the code that I'm going to test. I'm going to put a debug, I'm going to put a breakpoint over here as well, and therefore I can see what's happening in my code. And again, this is the basic way that you would debug your code. And this, by the way, obviously is being used continuously throughout all these exercises. I haven't shown you, but I created test cases for each one of the different plugins that we created and the batches that we created previously, and tested this before deploying to the server to see where issues happen. And again, as well as needing to have these test cases for automated testing. So I'm going to run this in debug mode. It takes a little bit time just for the program to run, to bring up everything that it needs to do in order to actually start the test case over here. And here I'm running this particular test, this particular class alone. So when the program, the debugger runs, it will stop at the breakpoint, and you will see over here that we can actually just run through the code and see basically each line. If you want, you can obviously go through however you want to do. You can skip through, skip over, and so on, the standard way to do that. And I can run through again each piece of code, and I can run if I want to. It's much easier to see in debug mode. I can run through, and it will run and kick and get to the to my plugin, and then I can just run through my plugin to see what's going on. And obviously I can put some, I can watch for specific changes within particular properties and so on and so forth. And in this particular case, I'm checking to see that my user already exists, and then I see that everything is working correctly, and I can complete the test. So hopefully you get an idea how we run JUnit test. You can run it in debug mode, you can run it in just run mode, and you can stop at any point and look at particular expressions. And that is a method that JUnit testing goes throughout this course. For everything that we have custom built, we're creating JUnit tests to see how they work. And as I said, it's also used for automated testing as well.